So hello and a warm welcome to the webinar, Moving from Access to Usage, Making Formal Finance Work for Women. I am Monami Dasgupta, Head of Research at D91 Labs. D91 Labs is a research think tank housed within Setu, which is a fintech company. And through our research, we aim to better understand the financial journey of Indians. We also aim to bridge the knowledge and empathy gap among stakeholders to improve digital financial services. Today, we have panelists who are themselves founders, researchers, and entrepreneurs who are deeply engaged with understanding the financial journey of women and as well as women entrepreneurs. To begin with, we have Saidi Chahal, founder and CEO of SHEROES, a women-only social networking platform, as well as Mahina Mani, CEO, a woman-only neobank. Chaitra Chidanand, co-founder of SALT, a fintech platform that's on a mission to close the gender gap in finance. Sanjana Govindan, vice president of Global Alliance for Mass Entrepreneurship, where she leads research and innovation for women entrepreneurs. And finally, we have Marco Dar, a paper cutting artist and an entrepreneur based in Shillong. Welcome, everybody. In today's webinar, we will be discussing various factors, circumstances, behavioral aspects, as well as market inefficiencies that restrict women to use financial services for their own financial well-being. We will not only discuss problems, but we'll also listen to solutions, some of which our panelists are already building. Before we begin, a quick housekeeping announcement. The last 10 minutes of this webinar will be reserved for Q&A, so please post all your questions in the chat. The webinar is being recorded and we are simultaneously streaming the webinar on YouTube. My colleague will post the YouTube link in the chat. So let's begin with the webinar. Before that, throughout the webinar, you will be seeing some quotes on the slides that we present. Basically, this webinar has taken some insights from our Banking on Women Chronicles, a project that was conducted in partnership with SHEROES and Mahila Mani. In this project, we basically conducted in-depth qualitative interviews of more than 30 women from different walks of life residing in Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 cities of India. The aim of this project was to understand women's financial behavior, their choice of financial instruments and apps, as well as their overall financial portfolio, along with their business and life aspirations. In fact, we didn't stop at only conducting this research, but we also created some personas based on the insights that we got from these interviews and also based on the socioeconomic background that our respondents were from. To quickly recap the personas, there were aspirants, pragmatists, explorers, warriors, trailblazers, and enthusiasts. To know more about our research, please visit the link in the chat box, which my colleague will send. Okay, so let me set the context for why there is a need for this webinar, as well as more conversation around women in finance. I'm sure since the beginning of the week, there have been a lot of talks, webinars, a lot of discussion around this, but no discussion is really enough when we come to understand the aspect of women in finance. To give you briefly about the macro situation, in India, I can say this despite being in the sector for some time, that financial products and services have largely not been designed keeping women or women's mental model in mind. There have been a few products, I will not deny that, there have been few products that have been targeted for women, for example, the joint liability group loans and multiple schemes by the government. But despite all of that, women still face barriers to avail them due to reasons, due to financial reasons, as well as other reasons such as patriarchal reasons, low workforce participation, and various other socioeconomic constructs. Data already shows that today the ownership of bank account among Indian women is more than ever before. We've done really good progress on that front, but we still lag behind men in terms of usage of those accounts, usage of debit and credit cards, as well as hesitate to use digital financial services. We will get to the factors behind this and why is this the case despite making progress on the access front. But before that, I would like to spend some time in understanding from our panelists the life circumstances that affect women's financial choices. If I can start with Saidi, I want to ask that what are the life circumstances and pivotal moments that affects women's financial position? And is there a more pressing need for a woman to plan their finances as compared to men? Before I give the mic to you, Saidi, I would say in our research, but then it was in collaboration with SHEROES and Mahila Mani, we found one of the main reasons was marriage, but that's just one of many. Saidi, over to you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Manami. And of course, we've thoroughly enjoyed the research. I hope everyone checks out the links that you're sharing. So, no hidden fact that we are deeply patriarchal. So, for most women, life starts with a little subtraction. If a boy is born, all the assets are going to go to him. It's a given. In some families, women get the property, but in most families, it's a no, right? And we all know the asset liability equation of how families and large patriarchal families treat women, right? Hey, oh, she's not going to be good for our family finances, and we have to spend on her marriage and all of that. I think for most women, life begins at that. And then of course some of us are super privileged and we've got progressive parents, and we make breakaways when we get forks in the road and we choose them. But for most women it starts with being the minus column of the family balance sheet. And then it, of course, education. I know, again, at some point women in technology careers or technology education begins to start falling off, and we all know technology careers are paying better than, let's say, operational careers. So that's the second point of access that breaks. And of course third is marriage and the universality of marriage. How everything is pegged. A woman's success is pegged to marriage, a man's success is pegged to career, and we continuously see this. And then of course I think it's not just children, it's the big fat Indian family, it's the big weddings, it's caregiving for the elderly. It's There are just too many impediments for you to really focus on not only building careers but also any form of wealth for yourself. So it's a lot of pile up over a period of time. And I think what it does is, over a period of time, it breaks your confidence. It takes away, I mean, the friction is so high, right? Just imagine having no assets in life and then having to buy your first asset. And how will you do it if you don't have, a great job, or, and then the workplace doesn't have gender parity, right? Pay parity. So I guess it is poorly designed. It's a massively systemic sort of challenge. And of course, until we do a lot of artificial pushing and building platforms and building ecosystems that are sort of very, very specific to saying, hey, we're going to specifically reduce the subtractions in life, then it might sort of have some headway for us.
Right. Very interesting insight, Saidi. Chaitra, if you could add on, in your experience at working at Salt, or even from your past experience, what are the circumstances that, pivotal moments that women face, and which also affects their finances?
Yeah, I mean, I resonate with what Cyrus shared, right? That has been the observation of large. What I think I'll add to what Cyrus said in terms of areas that surprised me. So when I was starting Salt, I really thought that this will be a product or a platform that will be largely a requirement in tier 2, tier 3 towns, right? I thought that people like, us, who Sairi rightfully described as privileged, in, coming from fewer barriers or fewer constraints imposed on us by families, I thought that people like us would be less, this product would not be required for them, right? And were we surprised? Like, boy, were we surprised. Like, we started talking to people, and then, much to our chagrin, surprise, and in some sense delight, from a perspective of, okay, there is an audience even in urban India. The customers that who we describe as urbanized women, westernized women, right? Like people who can speak English, who have access to smartphones, who come from various economic strata. There also, financial planning is something that has taken a very conscious backseat. And that was a very surprising sort of revelation that happened through these interviews that we started doing with people. Because when we started interviewing women, we didn't have a specific like target demographic in mind. And one conversation led to another. And the most beautiful part of these conversations was the fact that each and every one of those conversations ended by, it was an hour-long conversation. We were taking their time. We had to be grateful to them, but they used to thank us. And it was like the message given back to us was, this is the first time I'm talking about money to anyone in this manner, right? And the interview was more around, what is your relationship with money like? How does it flow through your life? How have you seen your parents' relationship with money evolve? How has it influenced you? How do you spend? Like, these were just basic questions. But across the board, the learning was that money is such a taboo topic, right? It's almost like good girls don't talk about money type of a thing. So I think that was a huge revelation. Then the second part was that understanding where are these barriers coming from. Like, is this a demand problem? Is this a knowledge problem? I think it has been wrongly diagnosed as a knowledge problem, at least for this segment that I'm talking about. In fact, instead, it is actually more of a problem of wanting to take the perfect action and therefore not taking any action. Problem of not wanting to take up any activity that has so much perceived administrative overhead, not even perceived, created administrative overhead by the industrialization of finance, right? So, and because for us, because we are privileged, it's an option. Like, so, and therefore you're like, okay, let me delegate it to the nearest member in my family who's willing to do this for me. And usually it's well-meaning fathers and husbands, or brothers in some joint family cases, right? So somebody asked us this early on in our journey, who's your biggest competitor? And we were like, the well-meaning dad. Like, the well-meaning dad is the biggest competitor for us, because that's where it all starts, right? And to understand what life circumstances affect financial planning for women, it starts as early as childhood, I feel. Because what happens in childhood, the slight nuance and difference between what happens with boys and girls, which comes from a place of protection, is a girl child is walking down the road, there is some eve teasing that happens, then she's told that, beta, don't worry, I will drop you to school from tomorrow, or I'll take you to college, right? Or you're riding a cycle, you fall, it's okay, I will let your brother drop you. But the same incidents happen to boys. They are like told, hey, dust off the mud, you have to figure out how to ride your cycle, tomorrow you have to ride a bike, after that you have to drive a car. Privileges are not taken away, right? So as girls, I think all of you would relate to this. Whenever you face such instances, you're reluctant to come and share it at home, because you don't want to be protected. You don't want to be like safeguarded from these things, right? You want to be allowed to, like, it's okay, I'll manage on my own. So we realized that that's what ends up subconsciously, subliminally. The fear was that if I make a wrong decision with my money, then my dad or my husband will tell me that, don't do anything, let me handle it for you. And that'll get taken away. And therefore, that desire to make that perfect decision kind of perpetuates into a very prolonged period of no action, because finance has been industrialized. A myth has been propagated that there is no role for intuition, and women inherently are creatures of intuition, right? And so when it's been propagated that intuition has no role to play, it's all about systematically understanding everything, and us having this propensity to want to know more before taking an action. Cumulative effect of all of that becomes inaction. So for me, I think that was one realization. The last one, which I'll take 10 seconds to talk about, is this life circumstances, right? So women, as you rightly point out on this slide that you have, marriage, giving birth to children, and then like those are the life circumstances that have affected them. And what that has caused is breaks in their income stream or breaks in their career, erraticity, right? Or the types of income streams moving from salary to freelance or business income, entrepreneurial income. But you see that same things are happening for the Gen Z, for men as well. So boys, but for different reasons. They may not be taking a break because they're compelled by their in-laws to stop working, but they're making a choice. They want to take a sabbatical. They want to move away from a fixed paying job to, exploring entrepreneurship, because this privileged class, the size of the privileged class is going on increasing, right? As our income levels go up. So the financial industry, which is designed products and services for my father's generation, where a human being, typically a man, is expected to go through a linear life journey of job, marriage, and a linear, child, then college to fees, then house and whatever. That is no longer going to be true for this next generation. So whether it is us as fintechs or the manufacturers of these products and services, everybody has to innovate. And I think the advantage that people like Sairi, Salt, like me have is when you're designing for women, you're designing for that future, right? So
Right.
in many ways, you are extending your relevance even to this audience, which is going to come and become increasingly larger in size.
Right. Thank you, Chaitra. Those are very insightful points that you've shared, especially around the, the kind of interviews you've taken and how much of intersection there is with more than just money and gender, but everything around family and culture. And I want to extend this question and go to Sanjana next to ask that, yes, we understand life circumstances at marriage, pregnancy, change in jobs, all of this affects. But if I need to kind of retract a little bit more and ask that, if I have to see what are the barriers to using financial products once they've signed up for the products, sometimes we have women who've kind of, I mean, in the exercise itself, you have women who've told us that yes, there is lack of information on what to do next, or maybe there is some cultural conditioning that things are done this way by this person in the family, and I don't know how to do better or how to get out of that loop. I want to know from you, Sanjana, that in your experience, what has been some of the barriers that have led to limited usage of these financial instruments?
Thanks, Manami, and great input from Sairi and Chaitra. So just picking up on that, it's interesting you brought up the access to schemes. In the early days of figuring out the quantum of what was available, both as working capital and welfare scheme to women entrepreneurs, we found out there's, for different kinds of segments, whether it's urban and rural, there's a surfeit of different opportunities. But every year, when you look at the balance sheet of either the NRLM or any of the scheme portfolios that are available, most of them have a bit 65 to 70% underspent. Money isn't getting absorbed. So early conversations were around, oh, women entrepreneurs are not taking the money, they don't have the capacity to absorb. Then there were questions around, perhaps men are borrowing money on behalf of the women. But when we talked to some of the entrepreneurs themselves, they gave a very simple input. They said, see, the schemes are not hard to understand, but oftentimes the burden of paperwork, the identity crisis that I have. Before marriage, I was a different person. Now, post-marriage, my identity does not exist. I have no credit history. I can't fill the paperwork. And the second thing they said is, they require me to go to a form, upload some sorts of documents, even things like a PDF scanner, which might not be compatible with my my very basic smartphone. I can't do that. So there is a first principles conversation that needs to happen around user design, around how we are looking at, we design schemes, and right now all solutions are supply side, especially on the government end. I need to allocate 20,000 crores to SHGs, and therefore I wrap it up in a bow. But nobody is thinking about how do I design it in a way that it's actually absorbed by the last individual in my network. And so that was the general, and unfortunately, the people unpacking issues around underspend are also men. So the narrative therefore kind of goes into this sort of twisted cycle of there aren't enough women entrepreneurs who know what they are doing or are absorbing capital. So yeah, that's just my experience so far.
Right. Those are really like something to think about, that post-marriage, what happens with KYC altogether. It's a new set of documents. It's something that, as everyone's saying in this panel, that as a privileged person, you will probably think of not changing your surname and continue everything as is.
And India has a particularly unique challenge around this, where in many cases, even your first name changes. So culturally, your first name, last name, everything changes. So
your entire identity is, absolutely. Actually, I want to kind of take that point ahead around barriers to access to financial instruments for women entrepreneurs. And I want to kind of open the stage for Sairi, Sanjana, Chaitra, everybody. And, we're talking about barriers to access to financial instruments, and somewhere we're talking about barriers to access to financial instruments for work, for women entrepreneurs. I want to know from you, Sairi, given that your history of working at founding SHEROES and working with so many women entrepreneurs, what are some of the main obstacles that women face when they are setting up a business, obtaining registrations, and then getting into the everyday life of managing cash flows, and or even thinking of expanding and raising capital for that? And all of this, given the understanding that there may not be a lot of collateral or a co-guarantor at their disposal.
Yeah. So look, I think, let me take a step back. I think even before the entrepreneur is thinking about collateral or, some technicality of consuming that financial product, let's assume it's a loan, I think for most women, the business has a uh, very different persona. Let me give you an example. If you folks have seen English for English and you see Sri Devi there, she's a homemaker who also runs a home business, and her business is real business, right? She has customers, she's getting paid, but that business is so integrated into her life, and obviously we have categorized businesses as SMEs, SMBs, Mudra, XYZ, SEZ. There's so many of these. There is nothing for this category of business, and majority of women build what we call, you can now call it a solopreneur or a micro entrepreneur, a business that's literally built around their lives. In some ways there's no differentiator even between a current account and a savings account. It's just an account, and these days sometimes it's just a wallet, like literally, a Paytm or something is sort of, substituting everything, and a lot of, thankfully, digital payments have gone up. So I think that's a fundamental sort of challenge. The other is just the cyclical nature of work. Most women end up doing a lot of very cyclical work. When it works, it really works. Sometimes, like COVID happened, everything went down, or you see certain sort of trends where this is our season, especially in small businesses which employ a couple of people. And third is, of course, this whole plethora of going to a bank. I think going to a bank is just a very scary syndrome. It's still scary for me at my age, having been a customer of a bank for like 20 years and doing so many of transactions, and lastly, I think just the simplicity of the products, like literally, hey, I need X amount of money to grow to an X amount of scale. How can I simply get that without really sort of, literally, having to cook up a potion, like a Harry Potter potion. So I think a lot of taking a loan or a line of credit from a traditional institution is really akin to that. And lastly, I think just the need for independence, because a lot of women don't have collateral. A lot of this is bring your husband, give us your family papers. Then it has become a family political matter. It's gone out of hand. The woman has lost her agency because everyone will take a call on that woman's business, and the fundamental idea of building a business has already got lost because she wanted to do it for herself. So I think we see that a lot. And when we think about financial products, one, we know that a lot of women build businesses that align with their lives. So sometimes they're cyclical, some they're small, sometimes they will become big, they will become factories, and they will become large businesses. But most businesses start small, and there's nobody really thinking about very small businesses because, I don't know, different reasons. And second is, most women also do many things, which means that they want a little bit of flexibility. For example, EMI is a very rigid format. Most people actually want to return the money faster because their cash flow comes in. So when money comes in, they want to return it, but sometimes they want a little moratorium to say, can I use this money for 2 months extra and I will still pay, but a little flexibility would be wonderful. So a lot of these small insights on making sure the product is not intimidating, but is also customized to the life and persona of the user.
Right, that's really interesting. The last point that you said, Saidi, around having some flexibility in the product and not trying to fit the person as per the product. We really need much more. Given the breadth of Indian population and inside that the breadth of the women population, there is so much heterogeneity. You cannot fit everybody in a few products. Chaitya, I want to ask the same question with you, but with the woman entrepreneur angle to it, that in your experience, what have you seen that have been obstacles for women who want to set up a business or who want to access capital? How do they go about, or where are the places that they fail to kind of go ahead and do it all?
I mean, I don't know how much more I can add to what Sairi said. It was very comprehensive, her answer. It's the problems are so systemic, right? I'll give you my own story. In fact, what led to, in some ways, me starting off my first company, which was simple. I moved to India wanting to do something. Actually, my co-founder and I, we had decided to do something at the intersection of entrepreneurship and working capital lending using alternative sources of data, right? We moved here and we were doing research around it. And then I was trying to set up my life here. First thing I did obviously was go to the bank, and I went to SBI. And like what Sanjana said, I was told that by the SBI assistant manager that, ma'am, we cannot take your father's address proof because now you're a married woman. And at that time, my husband lived in the US, which meant that they wouldn't open a local account for me. They opened an NRE NRO account for me. And I was so stunned in that moment. I'm pretty certain the guy was lying to me. I find it very hard to believe that SBI officially will make such a rule, but maybe they have it, right? But in that moment, I was like, should the customer in me be outraged or the feminist in me be outraged? I was not sure. And what that meant to my life was that every time I could not so much as make a simple online transaction during my day here because the OTP would go to my husband. Of course, I was lucky. I was an entrepreneur that led to me creating Simple, which bypassed all these things. And then, the rest is history. But my point is that it's both good and bad, right? Like, meaning these obstacles are, as Sanjana said, and as what Sari is saying, these are relatively easier to solve than harder things which come with, like, patriarchy. How will you solve for patriarchy? How will you solve for like these biases, right? Like subconscious biases. But these ones are, at least you can make some progress by addressing these types of things. And I think that's a good thing, right? Because that's how I see it. At least you address this low hanging fruit and you will make a decent chunk of progress. And then you address the harder problems as you go along. But that's what I see.
Right. Awesome. Sanjana, I know you worked a lot with women entrepreneurs and you've spent time with them one-on-one. How have you seen things progress through your years of experience in terms of similar, things that I've asked before, that how have women gone about registering their business, or how have women gone about raising capital when there has been no collateral, lack of co-guarantor, or even little or no support from family? Even if there is family support, it's still a big step for the woman to actually go to a bank or a banking agent and to say that I want a loan for building this thing, and having a proof of concept ready, which is in that language, in those terms. In your experience, how have women kind of navigated through such situations?
Well, I think, right at the outset, I feel like we talk a lot about this whole idea and celebrate jugaad with men, etc. But I think literally, without exception, every woman entrepreneur in India has had to have jugaad just to get her legs off the ground. Whether it was to even, register as a formal organization, to hire people, etc. And unfortunately, the reason why, exactly like Chaitra's problem statement, and so many across different kinds of segments are never mainstreamed, is because as a group, we don't have any heft. None of us are part of a CII where we're all hearing our problems and therefore talking to the banking industry and building a solution for it. So I think our first fall off happens because as women entrepreneurs across different segments, though we have very similar problems, the language is similar, maybe circumstances different, we don't have collective voice and therefore no heft or bargaining power. And hence nothing's changing. Now that's kind of taken as an accepted truth for most women and they find workarounds. Oftentimes it's monetizing personal assets. Gold is the most common thing I've heard. Go and pledge jewelry that I have, borrowed from another female member typically, because that's the easiest and quickest asset to liquidate. And I think the final thing that I've noticed though in all my conversations is just this incredible optimism, which keeps that journey alive. And the optimism is fueled in part by fear that I don't have a safety net, therefore I cannot fail. One entrepreneur put it to me so well. She said, I know what inheritance laws in books are and I know what they are in practice. While on book, my father may have left me something, I'll have brothers who will go to court, who will bribe a judge, who will change the outcome of that. And that is not, and a 20-year battle, I don't have the opportunity cost to fight it. So the system also, even assuming you have parents have good intentions, etc., is rigged against us, right? Our ability to manage and navigate rent-seeking officials, etc., is limited. We are in school and said, "Aise bribe do," and talk to this person like this. So I think if I had to summarize, I would say it's a combination of systemic design failure in the way both schemes, the experience and the languages for women, because it's a top-down approach. Nobody is doing it bottom-up, which is listen to the entrepreneur, co-create with her, for her, something that works. The second is definitely we are not, I think folks like Sairi and Chaitra are tapping into the real need and the optimism, creating that community and the, like a trusted space where I will not get screwed over. That's really, really important. And the final thing is, just how are you actually changing the narrative? So women entrepreneurs, are we coming together? Are we helping move the needle by bringing some heft, saying the same things? So in every forum that I've been, whether it's talking about finance, inevitably it comes back to we have similar problems, but our bargaining power is very limited. So what does that solution look like? I think we have to start moving in that direction as well.
Thanks, Sanjana. Those are really points to kind of take back a little deeper. And I really liked your point around women use gold. And this is nothing new. This we've been using, I mean, the female members of the family across generations have been using it forever, and thank God for it, because that's really, for some families and so some women, that's the only thing that they have, and confidently say that yes, this is for me and this is my protection, my liquidity, my safe asset, everything all in one. But that's really was supposed to be a last resort and not the only resort. But those are really interesting points to kind of take back. Sairi, as I want to come back to you now, as a founder of a neobank for women, and Chaitra as a co-founder of a fintech platform, India right now has a flourishing digital-first market in India. Despite that, we still see a very slow adoption of digital financial services among women. And this is, I mean, if I have to overlay one more statistic, we have a growing base of women on the internet. Women are using more women are using internet than ever before. But why is there still a slow adoption of digital financial services among women? And what really influences this kind of action? Is it low control over their money? Is it risk averseness towards the screen and app and all of it? Or is it a supply side problem where the app has somehow not been designed to match a woman's mental model? Chaitra, if we can start with you, and then Sairi and Sanjana.
It's actually a distribution side problem. It's misdiagnosed as women are late movers, late adopters of technology. But if you think about it, and this was something I learned firsthand, right? This again goes back to my previous startup. I was designing the offline solution for Simple, and that gave me the opportunity to physically interact with people. Because when you're building a fintech company, you're always sitting in your office and innovating, right? That's very different from actually being physically in the same space and talking to users and doing it grounds up. So Simple Offline was really my first opportunity to do what I call the, phase one was armchair innovation, and phase two was like grounds up innovation, as Sanjana beautifully described, right? And there was just so much joy in it, because I could see very clearly the difference between men and women in terms of their, what I would, I guess, very playfully describe as their take rate, right? Men were very binary. Very clearly, they were like yes or no. And there was nothing you can do to move the no's to yeses, because the no's were always very rigid. In Simple's case, because it was credit, they were like, my father has told me that son, never take credit in your life. Therefore, even if you tell them there is no credit here, this is incidental convenience, they won't change it. Women, on the other hand, by far were always fence sitters. Like almost 10 out of 10 will not give you a straight answer and say either yes or no. They are fence sitters. And it's not like, my discovery was that is the problem. That their decision, when companies sell cosmetics, they know that they're selling to these fence sitters. Right from day one, their marketing and distribution caters to solving for this fence sitting, and they do things to make them move away from being fence sitters to decision makers. In women's case, a lot of it is about they make thoughtful decisions, right? Women juggle a lot of things. We don't have time for trial and error too much in our lives. So you want to buy one thing, but you want to buy that one thing that works for you, and that value consciousness is very high. So therefore, you end up making thoughtful decisions, and thoughtful decisions take time. Now, the only way acceleration can happen in such cases is through social proof, right? Through trust building. So that's where the community and social proof angles come in. And actually, we don't realize this, but companies like Nykaa, Myntra, diapers.com in the US, Zappos in the US, they have solved for this. It's not like just because you're selling cosmetics, women will change their behavior and suddenly become binary like men. They will still be fence sitters. It's just that when you're selling cosmetics, you know your audience is women, therefore shuru se you do things differently. So that has been the foundational thesis for Salt, is that because this is the problem, can we, the question we asked ourselves is, by taking that same approach that a cosmetics company or a fashion apparel company takes and applying it to financial services, can we achieve the same results, which is an accelerated adoption from women? And I think we are seeing it, because we are following exactly the approach that Sanjana described, which is grounds up, right? Like, we are listening to our users, we are talking to them based on observations and a bunch of POCs. We are creating products. We are not doing, like my co-founder Shinjini, she says this all the time because she has come from deep supply side background. She's like, so far the industry has been built to sell, not to buy, right? What we are creating is buyers, and women are buyers. They cannot be sold to.
This is very insightful, Chaitra, about I will take away the fence sitter thing and think about it deeply with respect to all the decisions that I take in my life, and see a little more deeply of how that goes. Sai, over next to you, I want to ask, you have experience from both running Mahila Money as well as SHEROES. What is stopping them from using digital financial services to its maximum potential?
Absolutely. So first of all, I agree with what Chaitra said. Women don't like being sold to, they want to be buyers, I think. And it comes from place of trust and, a lot of those behavioral aspects you spoke about. I think for a second, we also have to look at the macro in India. We're the country with the lowest amount of women having salaried incomes. Our women in workforce numbers are dismal. What that means is that, let's look at what is being built, right? So the banks were built for the salaried, regular income, collateralized person. Okay, women are not part of that cohort in a big, big way. That number is increasing, but the math still doesn't add up. And when it comes to the fintech world, it has become this giant chest beating competition. Okay, and it's become this lettuce. So again, it's either building for a large number of people who banks were building for, they're just building better, or it is building in a very irrational way, right? Like high interest rates, or some of these these are viral products, they're fantastic products, but for a certain class of consumers. I think women need more trust in financial products fundamentally. And they also, like, I'll give you a small example of trust. I think historically, it's hard to get through a bank's customer support, and fintechs don't want to have a customer support. They will say, come to our app and you will never need one. In our case, we really believe it should be easy for you to talk to a person at the end of the line, because it builds trust. So that line is actually a video line and not a phone line, because you can see a face on the screen and it just sort of makes you feel a lot more comfortable about using a product. I think, look at the adoption of payments. So there is that, this is a myth that women don't want to use screens and women don't want to adopt, all the fanciness of fintechs and digital financial products. I think they're not enough products for women in the first place. We launched Mahila Money's first product 6 months ago. We've grown to 250x. Okay, we were not ready for this kind of adoption. We are literally dying under the weight of demand right now, because we can't keep up. Like, there is a lot of this we haven't built for women, for sure, but also the that entire experience, right? Which is whether taking more, like, we are very committed to the micro entrepreneur persona, because we feel that's really the segment we understand well, and also connects to generating of income. I think for us, that the whole chain is income generation, access to capital, access to other financial products. So net, I make more money in 3 different ways by being part of this ecosystem. So we're building a thesis around it, and then we're building, entire stack of consumer products around it. But I don't think anyone's gone that deep at all. And we're just about scratching the surface. I mean, if we do really well, we will get to 5 million women, 10 million women. We have 400 million women in this country. At least 200 million women are ready to be served. and there's nobody building for them. So for sure, this is this is a massive gap. And of course, within that, you will see personas. You will see the entrepreneurs, you will see women in corporates, you will see women who are first generation of income earners in their families. You will also see very evolved consumers, the black card consumers and all of that. Nobody's designing enough products to begin with, for the segment.
Interesting, because as we've also been talking internally, a lot of times within my team also, we're just kind of writing about the same products for different groups of people, but we intrinsically know there is a heterogeneous population out there. But there are, again, supply side challenges, there is profit making challenges, regulatory issues, and all of that. But we still have two founders on our panelists. So yeah, I think things are moving. Sandan, I want to ask you with respect to this kind of schemes or things that women entrepreneurs have availed. What has been your experience in terms of them using digital financial services? So, for instance, when there are entrepreneurs who, obviously during the time of COVID, they were probably trying to sell online. They had to come online. They couldn't work out of their, have physical office for them. What has been the adoption for digital financial services among them, and what have been the barriers for that?
So I think just anecdotally, COVID was like a great acceleration for those who were in desperate need of actually finding these new markets and selling to consumers who they could no longer discover because of the restrictions of the pandemic. So there was this sort of forced migration. What I also saw on the other side was a lot of the players began to make their model more amenable to this new demand coming from this kind of entrepreneur. So whether it was being available low bandwidth or WhatsApp first or vernacular, or using different kinds of proxies instead of KYC, all of that emerged as a function of these sort of 2 years of lockdown. But what I'm also seeing is, now that things are going back to normal, that rubber band has gone back to its original form. It hasn't sustained. And so the real proof for me would have been, has that innovation, was it a band-aid to just solve for that short period of time? Or has it led to an entire new type of thinking around how will you make these products, services, and experiences more accessible for women? And so that's probably an interesting thesis to follow and look at from a user journey perspective for women entrepreneurs. I think a last input that for me, which was counterintuitive, was, there was a lot of conversation around women will have, lack of access to smartphones. It will be hard for them to navigate, going online, first-time users. It was actually very interesting to watch how quickly, as communities, they coalesced, figured out best practices. There were incredibly effective to-dos, checklists, toolkits that you and me cannot create with the fanciest design researchers, that they had, which worked for them. So I think what worked well was the fact that the opportunity and the problem existed, and suddenly there was a critical mass of women together as a group who needed to solve it, and as usual, they figured out a workaround. What hasn't worked well is some of the proxies that came into place to make that experience better, which benefited women, are probably not going to stay in place, because it'll go back to business as usual. And so how do you enable that to happen? So that's just the reading now. It's still too early to say whether it'll last or not, but it's a curious learning.
Right. And some of the things that you've said is very encouraging on how they've taken things in their hands. But yeah, how long it'll last is still, the time is yet to tell that. Okay, now I really want to turn to Marco Dar, whom we have on our panel. Marco Dar is an entrepreneur and a Mahila Money user. She's multi-talented and she believes in doing some work that also gives her true happiness. She has been a former banker and a business development manager, and now she is a full-time paper cutting artist. She runs a shop that sells handmade items such as shawls and sweaters. She also helps her family in running a business that sells watches and clocks. Thank you for joining us, Marco Dar, today. My question to you would generally be that, because you had some experience from moving from a corporate setup to running a business, what has been your experience in accessing capital for your business? What have been your obstacles? And majorly, what are the your go-to financial instruments for your business? Over to you, Marco Dar.
Yeah, thank you so much. I was into a corporate world, I was working with a bank as a business sales executive. Then I was working with another company from Calcutta. Then I was working as a sales executive out there. Then later I was promoted to business development manager. The post which it was given to me, like, it's very good, but the salary was not given on time, and sometimes like they don't even rise the salary which was given to me, because I was heading like for the entire Northeast, and like it's really hectic for me. I have to take care of the family, and really it was really I can't even imagine about it. So after that, like, I was just discussing with my husband and what to go about it. He said, like, just leave it and do something on your own. And apart from, like, I was working with the those companies, I was doing my crockery business from home, and even clothes, like, from home itself. I have some of the selected customers that I have. So I couldn't give more time on that because I was busy with my work. So when I left the job, then I was full time. I was doing those business. Then later on, my husband was saying me, why don't you try paper cutting? Doing. I was saying, what is that? Then he showed me. Then I couldn't even hold the blade properly. So he taught me, and it was really a hectic time because I really don't know what it's all about and all. Then he explained to me everything. Then I practiced every day. I said, no, I'm not going to leave it. I'm going to do it by all means. Then I practice it every day, the lines, the shapes, the designs, and everything. It came out so perfect. Then later on, I opened an Instagram account and I posted there, and people, they like it, and I get some of the commission work also, which really make it so much interesting. When you design when you design, and when you finish the cutting, it gives you that exciting moment. You really feel happy with that, really. Then later on, my father-in-law, so last year, he asked me, he said, Marco, can you please help me in the shop, because he was old enough, now. So I said, okay, fine. Then I was just helping him out, and went into a shop. Like, it was really like a new thing for me, a new venture. Then again, I have to start again. I said, okay, fine, let's go about it. Then I start liking it, get talking to customer, different kind of customers, and there's so many kinds of obstacles also coming in the way, but it's okay. I said, no, just leave it. I'll just do it. Then I also learned to repair watches also. And there was one customer, I still remember, like, he was telling me, oh no, like, you know how to repair watch? I said, yes, I know it. And he said, oh, from where did you learn? Because, like, being there in the shop, my uncle did not come for his work, so my father-in-law and me was there. So I end up he said, like, no, you should learn, all these things and all. I said, because you are the one, like, who'll be taking care of it. Maybe later on, I don't know. He said, okay, fine. Then I start learning about the batteries and chain cutting. Then so many things, I learned from there. Then dealing with the customers, and really, it's really amazing. I kind of like it. When I go back, to the loan sections and all, I still remember when I was doing the clothes business and crockery. Then I opened a shop also during that time. The thing is that, like, I was short of capital. Then I was just telling my dad, I just wanted to take a loan. Then he said, okay, fine. Then I went to the bank. Then, they was asking about so many kinds of documentation. They was asking, my goodness, like the paperwork that they needed, from the balance sheet and to the stock statement. Then there was also asking for a guarantor. I said, okay, fine. For where will I get a guarantor? He said that no, it should be a government servant. And thank God my dad was a government servant. So I was just asking my dad, can you please help me to be a guarantor for this? Because I'll tell you very frankly, okay, like nowadays, you just can't get anyone to be a guarantor for you, because like it's very difficult nowadays. And suppose if you get also, do you have to pay them? Like here, like it usually happen like that. So even like they was asking for like a fixed deposit for, if suppose like you're taking a loan of 2 lakhs, they're asking a deposit of 60,000 that you have to keep fixed with the bank, and unless you don't repay all the loan, you're not being able to take it out. Then I was like, just imagine I'm taking a loan of 2 lakhs and 60,000 already in the bank. Then 1,40,000. What would you do with that money?
Makes no
So I
sense.
have to pay the rent of the shop and so many things and all. So my goodness, I was saying, this is a bad idea, taking the loan. Then sorry, I tried to repay it. Then later on, when I heard, like I was a part of the SHEROES, I think so. It's been many years. I don't remember that because I'm very bad in remembering years and all. So then that time I think so, 10,000 they were starting to give the loan from like SHEROES. Mahila money that time it was not there. So I applied for the loan and it was so easy, like you just fill the form and document, just my PAN card and Epic, like, and the photographs of mine, and just that, you just have to give that, and no guarantors need, and you just get the loan in just maybe it's maybe for an hour, maybe next day or something like that. I don't remember that because it was long time back. So then after I paid the loan, then I took again another loan. It was 25,000. And then after repaid that, I said, like, can I take another loan? I repaid like my installment was very good, because I have built my trust with SHEROES. The more important thing is that, building trust. Yeah. So when you have that trust, from from someone, then I called Siddhika, then she said, like, yeah, Marco, you can apply for how much do you need? I said, the more the better, at least I can do something like more, I have so many things that in my mind that I want to do, but I don't have a capital, Then she said, okay, fine. Then she said, like, we're giving till 2 lakhs. I said, okay, fine, that's good. Then she said, she was asking me, like, for how long? I said, like, 2 years. Okay, that's really good, like, then I filled the form and he said, I was thinking, okay, fine. Like, I discussed with my husband, like, maybe your signature might be needed, now it's already 2 lakhs, the amount is also a little bit huge. And he said, no, nothing, no signature of no guarantor, like from your dad or your husband's, like, it's so amazing. Like, you don't have to give a down payment also for that. Really, it's kind of a blessing for me, like, really, I give all the thanks to Money and SHEROES for giving the opportunity, like, for us, like a woman entrepreneurs, to to really do well, in whatever we have dreams, to fulfill that dreams.
Right, Marco, that I have to say this, that you as an entrepreneur, you're inspiring in the sense of you've upskilled yourself, you've been resilient, you've adapted to whatever the situation has you faced, what all the curveballs that have been thrown to you. And you had that growth mindset that no matter what, I am going to build this. And at the same time, there has been products, services from the supply side, from Mahila Money, that has matched the kind of person you are, that has matched the kind of effort you've taken to kind of get this loan. So this is really inspiring. I'm only glad that you could find a lender who could understand your journey. And this is the kind of journey that even at D91, we are always trying to capture, that knowing it from the papers is one thing, but knowing it from the entrepreneur's mouth is completely another thing. I think we're slightly short on time, so we'll go for the Q&A now. Let me just go through the question and answers, and I can ask the respective panelists. So we have a question. Okay, so I think we have a question, Marco Dar, for you already. So Deepika has asked that if you can tell us a little bit more about what makes a bank or a formal financial institution feel scary to you or to women around you?
Oh, when you go to bank, like when you go and meet somebody in a bank, like you have to really have your time, to go there, because sometimes they're not available, they're not free, and they'll ask you to come again another day, and the same thing again and again. It happens. It's really scary for me. Sometimes I don't go to the bank. What I do is that, like, sometimes I just deposit the money through the ATM machine. I really don't go to bank, because like you have to like stand on a queues, and that really irritates me, sometimes.
No, these are real problems. These are absolutely real
But
problems.
it's interesting because there are significant budgets that PSUs have that is for gender training. But unfortunately, the way they're used is not either thought about in terms of redesign of the training, of the infrastructure, of the experience, nothing. But this is a constant problem and input from every woman entrepreneur. The bank is scary. The opportunity cost of spending 2-3 days, multiple visits with no clear outcome at the end of it does not justify the time. And oftentimes then you're also, it's very demoralizing when large parts of your, all the things you work towards are broken apart by a manager or something. So, yeah.
Right. So we have another question. It's an anonymous question. So the person is asking that while interacting with policy think tanks or government policy makers, do we see a general direction or the want to design financing scheme for women? And the stage is open for all, whoever wants to take it.
Sari, you want to go first or I can?
No, please go ahead, Sandhya.
No, I think the one thing we found in all our conversation with policy is that there's two veils that folks are hiding behind. One is we don't have enough data, so we don't know who we are designing for. What is the persona of these women? And therefore, I feel like the work you're doing at D91 is very useful, because potentially that feeds one of these challenges, or perceived challenges around data. I think second is just the way the approach is, right? It's tools, infrastructures and language made by men for men. So policy is also not just in finance, but across welfare schemes, across most parts of our economy are very, very, if you look at the gender parity, there's a huge mismatch. So the same principles apply here. There is intent simply from the perspective of this is a good vote bank, it's bankable, low NPA, all of that. But it just stops at the intent to a large extent. That's my experience so far.
Right. We have a question from the YouTube live session that's going on in parallel, and the person asked which companies, or I would extend it to even initiatives that are out there that bring financial literacy for women and nudging them to make right decisions. If I can also add to this question of how far does financial literacy go in terms of getting women into the formal finance space? Chaitra, Sairi, anybody?
So look, I think there are a lot of organizations. If you go to Instagram, you will see a lot of content. A lot of historical planner sort of institutions have become now creators of content. I do believe that there are two parts to this. One is just earning more money and enablement, I think. And second is, of course, a lot more around financial decisions around financial products. I think these are two very distinct sort of cohorts. And while I think there is a lot of content around financial literacy, it again lacks uh, any sense of relatability for all of us. We all know of financial content, but thankfully it's a new and emerging segment. We see a lot of people trying to reinvent the space in terms of how financial content is getting consumed. We do a little bit at Mahila Money via the community, via our own sort of play, but we also bring in a lot of partners. Anyone who works or does it, right from individual solopreneurs to very, very specific institutions, and even the traditional ones, the large banks and so on.
Right. Okay. So I think we've passed 4 minutes 5, so I'll quickly wrap up the webinar. I mean, we had a few more questions, but for the time constraints, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. So big thank you to all the panelists, Sairi, Sanjana, Chaitra, Marco Dar, for sharing your valuable insights. And we hope that in the near future, women are able to control their finances and attain their financial well-being. Finally, thank you to everybody in the audience for taking the time to attend. Thank you, Amrita and D91 team for making this webinar possible. We will be hosting a recording of this video on our YouTube channel. If you would like to stay in touch with us and collaborate with us going forward, do join the D91 Inner Circle Slack space. It is a space for us to brainstorm, share relevant work related to financial inclusion and fintech. And you can also get an amazing opportunity to publish on our platform if you have any ideas. The link is in the workspace in the chat box. You can also subscribe to our Tales of Bharat blog, where we've been publishing all our work, as well as the Banking on Women Chronicles. With that, thank you everyone and have a very good evening.